Hi, welcome, and today in the midst of our reading we get this marvelous small little, actually the shortest book of the Bible, which I always thought was Jude, but nonetheless it turns out it's Obadiah, this little prophet whom we know almost nothing about, and seems very focused, just a few verses, but nonetheless has much to say. So today I wanted to kind of focus on that, even though there's some other parts of our reading. First of all, um, we don't know much about Obadiah. We probably have to guess that he's not from some royal lineage. He's not part of the priesthood. He's not from wealth and means, because usually if you are, somehow you're listed as the son of someone, and it kind of your genealogy is laid out there. In this case, we don't get that. The other thing that's hard to pin down is exactly when he did his, at least scholars struggle, when he received this vision and proclaimed it. Though having it put here at 586 probably seems to be the best spot for it, because this is at that time when Jerusalem is invaded, and the Edomites have not only helped the enemy, but are rejoicing in Israel's destruction. And that seems to fit in verses 10 to 14 with Obadiah's message, which really is focused on enemies. And I think that's what I would share with you today. A couple of commentators I read kind of touched on this. What we need to learn here is, who are our enemies? Are they, and why are they our enemies? And it's really giving me pause to think about today, and so hopefully it will do that same for you. Number one, who are our enemies? Are they people with whom we merely have a disagreement, or who have done something to us, or whom we don't like? Or are they truly enemies because they are enemies of God? Notice God never says you will not have enemies, and in fact, probably another great place to go in conjunction with Obadiah is to go to Matthew 5 through 7 and look at Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, because he does speak about not only having enemies, but how we treat those enemies in some detail. And nowhere does it say you aren't going to have enemies. The question is, who are they, and how do you deal with them? And the truth is that here our focus in Obadiah is on the Edomites, and of course rightly so at this case, but not just because the Edomites were people that the Israelites, and in this case Judah, have been struggling with down through the years, because as you know, Israel is from the line of Jacob, and the Edomites come from the line of Esau, and they have been battling ever since Jacob and Esau walked the earth. So we have this enmity already between them, but that's not really the reason that they are enemies here. They are enemies because literally they are enemies of God. They have turned against God. They have turned against God's people in this case. And therefore, what we're going to see, God has promised through Obadiah that there will be judgment and there will be punishment for Edom. But it really reflects God's call to us and kind of points us to what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount. What do we do with these enemies? And what Jesus says is you are to love them, you are to bless them, you are to pray for them. To do that will take some major transformation in you and I know for me. We will need the power of God in us to transform our hearts and minds, to be able to look beyond the circumstances, to see people as they really are, as children of God, and to be able to do those things for them as Jesus would have us do them. Now, how is that possible? And I guess as God points out that ultimately the exile would return, and that deliverance would take place. The real deliverance is not just the return of the people to Jerusalem. The real deliverance, as we know it, happens on the cross. And in that deliverance, Jesus takes on the greatest enemy, in other words, Satan and sin and death, and defeats them for us. So when Jesus takes away the real enemy, we now find that all of those divisions that separate us as enemies in the world kind of get wiped away, because at the foot of the cross we all stand on level ground, and therefore because of what Jesus did, we now are able to reach across and to do those things with those whom we might have called enemies in a different way, to love them and to bless them and to pray for them, knowing that in the end, all things are in God's hand. And the only way we find that we're able to do that is when we trust in Jesus and what he has done for us. So today, what this has kind of caused me to do is kind of think a little bit about my enemies and to offer some time in prayer to help me, by God's power, to deal with them maybe a little differently than what I have done in the past. And so I want you to know that's kind of my challenge for today. And that comes out of this little book of Obadiah. And it's a powerful message and one that we need to hear, I think. And it's interesting that it's really not preached very often. I'm not sure I've ever heard a sermon on Obadiah, but today I thought I'd share that with you, and hopefully it will have some value for you as it's had for me today. Have a great day. We'll look forward to talking with you again.